Hello shareholders, hello potential shareholders, and of course hello to the YouTube channel members. This week's vlog is entirely devoted to goats. It's Larissa Switlick's Goatgate week, and I've really been thinking of very little else over the last week, so I don't have much more to offer you than picking over the carcass of the media goat wars. So here's the image Larissa posted of herself with the dead feral goat, and from that point on the world seemed to go mad. The media had been softened up earlier in the week. I mean, we had the elephant hunt that went out on South African news service, News 24, the American shooting an elephant. So you see the elephant go down, and then you see the herd kind of showing empathy and charging. It did not look good. And in the UK we had the Woburn trophy hunting story, which of course had our very own Paul Childerley at its heart. From a media point of view, Larissa looked like a pretty easy one for the antis. All they had to do was bang the gong, marked animals are cute over and over again. For us it was more difficult. We had to get three things into our first answer because there were definitely three things that the public didn't like about that photograph. The first one is that, and I was quite surprised that nobody really knows this, that large animals, where there are no predators like the UK, are managed, and if they aren't managed, then you get what you have with the League Against Cruel Sports, which is they all start overpopulating and dying of disease. League Against Cruel Sports, Baronsdown Sanctuary in the West Country, and we did a film about that. You can click on the eye symbol if you want to watch that to swat up. The second thing we had to get across was that trophy hunting is part of management, and I saw this again and again. The antis were very keen to separate trophy hunting from management, so they acknowledged management has to take place, but the trophy hunting side, they wanted to get rid of that and kind of single it out and try and get it banned. And of course you can't, because trophy hunting is exactly the same as management, except there's money involved. So the lucky landowner or the stalking guide or whoever it is gets some cash to put towards a new car, buy chainsaw, buy binoculars, whatever it takes, extra conservation tools. And the third thing we had to get in there, which is slightly more difficult, is the cultural problem that most of us in the UK would not have posted a picture like Larissa's. In fact, I think I could probably say nobody in the UK would have posted a picture like Larissa's. But I'm not blaming Larissa, because she is part of a different hunting culture. The antis get this fantastic situation where the whole world of antis agrees that animals are cute. They're very one-dimensional like that. We have hunting cultures all over the world that are completely different from each other. So, for example, the Germans and the Danes like trophy hunting. The Americans go to Africa to decorate their houses. But the Americans don't understand the British love of pheasant shooting, and the British are not such big trophy hunters. And of course none of us understand the Chinese method of hunting, which is to try and wound things because it keeps it fresher on the way to the kitchen, where perfectly logically they want to cook the animal and eat it. So where did this leave the story? Well, actually I think the Larissa story was a good example of the antis overplaying their hand, because certainly with the Woburn story and the elephant story, we hadn't quite marshalled all those arguments. I mean, nobody has really kind of hit UK trophy hunting quite as hard as the antis hit it last week. Now, day 4 or 5 or 6, by the time we get to Larissa, we know what we're talking about, and we can do that. We can get all those arguments into a single answer and then keep banging that drum. So it's a battle of logic versus emotion. Now, in a studio situation, emotion always wins, but in the end, logic wins, and that's why I think we will win this argument, and why I'm actually very happy to have this argument. So Field Sports Channel has another reason, separate to everybody else, from wanting to fight this fight and win this argument, because Larissa contributes to the programme, and because 20% of our audience is in the USA, who don't see what the fuss is all about. That said, we do broadcast from a kind of British cultural point of view, so even though we're popular in the USA, we are definitely a British programme, so we are able to say, I like Larissa, but I wouldn't have posted that photograph. That's absolutely fine. And I spoke to Larissa actually just as this whole thing was getting underway. She was boarding a bush plane, she's off hunting for 2 weeks, and she said, why did it have to happen now? But she's been pretty firm, she's sticking to her guns over being a hardcore huntress and American style, and all credit to her for that. Not necessarily the British cup of tea, but I'm very happy to not try and achieve a consensus in world hunting as long as we agree we all hunt. Now, like many of the shooting organisations, Gary Doolin, who's a shareholder, was also up. I did quite a lot of media last week. And one of the things that came out of that was when someone like Eamon Holmes from ITV's This Morning programme says hunting is murder, and he claims to have about 1 million viewers for that programme, well, some of them get incited to issue death threats to hunters. And I don't think Eamon quite understands that's what happens. If he says hunting murder, then people say hunters should be killed. And I dropped a story on the Evening Standard to try and get them to out this. I don't know if they actually did anything with that. I don't think they did. But the good news is after 10 years of running Field Sports Channel, I can tell you that the Antis do not carry out their death threats, and we are still living proof of that. So my appearance on ITV's This Morning landed me in the Daily Mirror with lots of viewers are disgusted type stories. Quite proud of that. And then we go into Larissa, and I head off to the BBC studios in Taunton, which are in a new shiny building out by the motorway. And they have a down-the-line camera there, and they have a green screen, so you can put any image behind you like. Actually, they don't have any rural images, can you believe it? The best they've got is the River Tone that goes through the centre of Taunton and Taunton Castle, so I kind of swap between those. But I have asked them to produce a kind of nice bland shot of Exmoor that I can sit in front of while I'm talking to BBC News to give me a little bit more context. I did BBC News there. I did several radio stations. I also did BBC Scotland in a kind of mid-morning shock jock type debate where they literally gave me 1 minute. That was where I have to try and get those 3 things across as quickly as possible. And then I left the BBC studio, as I say, nice and warm and comfortable, for the cold car park in Taunton, where I parked my phone on the roof of the car and did 2 Skype interviews with ITV News and with Sky. Now, I've put a link on the website to much of what I'm talking about today, and you will see the Sky interview there. You can judge for yourself. I think Dominic Dyer, who's the Badger activist, and that day he was representing the Born Free Foundation, I think he overplayed his hand a little bit. He couldn't seem to get a foothold on goats because, like at Olympet, we have to manage feral goats, and I think he accepts that. And I also think that in his own head he couldn't escape the logic that the trophy hunting is just going to help that. So he tried to widen it out to grouse shooting, and I think that's he lost some focus there. However, Skype in a car park in Taunton is not an ideal place for any of us to present the arguments for hunting, so it was a bit of a ropey interview, and a bit like the Western Front. I think we made a few yards and perhaps lost a few yards too. Over the whole course of it, I did have one joyful moment when a BBC presenter said, I said, would you like to go stalking? And he said, no, definitely not. He said he couldn't think of anything worse. So I was able to point out to him that I thought he was a little emotionally stunted, because, like many Antis, he's only capable of looking at an animal and going, ooh. Whereas as a hunter, I can go, ooh. I mean, I find the 101 Dalmatians too stressful to watch. Even the trailers too stressful to watch. I'm a big animal ooher. But I can also look at a big animal and go, wow, and I can go, yum. And I think that is his loss. The crew, the staff from his station, one of them rang me up laughing afterwards and thanked me for making that comment. So where does this all leave us? Well, we are off to Ardnamurchan, which is one of the places Larissa was shooting, and we are going to be filming with Blaser there in the next couple of weeks. I'm asking if we can do a feral goat stalking film, because I think that would be good. We can present the positive side of it, present the arguments. We can also make a really important point that Michael Russell, the former Minister of the Environment at the Scottish Government, who was calling for goat shooting to be banned, was actually, when he was Minister of Environment, the one who ordered the estates to cull lots of goats. So we can point out quite a lot of hypocrisy with that film. In addition, I would like to look at organising a trophy hunting conference, which I think we could do in February, which sounds like a radical idea, but again, when we've got logic on our side, I think it's a good one to do. One viewer contacted me and said, shouldn't we take down all our Larissa videos because it just foments debate and makes us look bad? But we always believe this in Field Sports Channel, unless you are loud and proud about what you do, you really do risk being banned. It's only if it's when you try and hide away that things go wrong for you. So we have got to do this, I think, and we should, in this conference, if it goes ahead, we should include the Antis, ask them, okay, what's your alternatives to management? What's your alternatives to trophy hunting, to putting money into conservation and see what they say. Best of all, I think we should have Larissa as a guest speaker. Now, all of this comes about thanks mainly to this whole share offer, thanks to you. Without your support, I wouldn't have been able to afford to go around the studios last week. Thank you very much for that. If you are still thinking of putting more in, if you haven't put in any yet, if you'd like to, please go to fieldsports.investory.com, and I'm now going to read you the disclaimer, which goes like this. Risk warning. Investments of this nature carry risks to your capital as well as potential rewards. Approved as a financial promotion by Investors Limited, which is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority number 072368828. And that is about as far away from a feral goat on Isla as you can possibly get. I'll see you next week.